Good morning, good evening, good afternoon.
Hello from the moon.
Is that where you are? I don't think you'd get good internet from there.
I'm just vacationing there for the time being.
So we don't have Hanny with us today. He's sick or fell off a donkey or something like that.
Yeah, he'll probably let us know how it went.
Today we're talking about certainty, or at least some people's need for certainty, and how religions and Islam take advantage of that. And this would have been nice to be a part of the mini series we already did on how to de-indoctrinate. But in some sense, the whole live stream is about that. We'll be talking about this repeatedly. And part of why we picked this topic is we have somebody that wants to do it. The way it got started with him was there's a post I wrote a year ago, which he brought up, or I posted a second time recently, and then he brought it up saying he's working on it. So I suggested, you want to work on it together? So to come on the live show and work on it. So let's, he's not here yet. I'm not sure why, but we can go ahead and maybe get started with that. Since he's not here. So here's the post. I titled it, Islam Preys on People Who Seek Certainty. And I start by talking about since the beginning of philosophy, and I guess what I'm saying the beginning of philosophy is like ancient Greece. Maybe that's inaccurate. Maybe that's just historically what got recorded and kept. Maybe its stuff is older and those records got lost or whatever. I don't know. But
I mean, we can always argue that as long as there have been humans, philosophizing was there in some form or another.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the threads that have actually survived in the salient culture that most of us on the planet basically belong to right now, we can trace a lot of that to
there's a couple of lines though, right? Like if you talk about, I don't know, Buddhism, that's pretty old. I think it's older than ancient Greece. There's philosophy in there.
Yeah, and if
different trajectory. That's the East, whatever. This is the West.
Yeah. And you have plenty of people who philosophize in general in the East. You have a lot of Chinese prominent philosophers who more or less, I cannot really bring up dates right now, but I think they were active more or less parallel to Greece, or more plus or minus.
I'm just going to send a message real quick.
Yeah, so the whole idea of the start of philosophy as maybe a kind of a reaction of sorts to another type of thinking that would have been prevailing at the time for humans in general, is if you're looking at how we face natural forces, how we might have issues like predicaments, whether it be sickness, financial or economic hardship. Yeah, a flood,
a volcano erupting,
all sorts of things. You would like to have some kind of a certainty about, am I going to be cultivating my crops right now, or are they going to die because of the drought? Is there going to be a storm that's going to kill us all, or something of the sort? So that desire to seek certainty is something that's really embedded in us. And
yeah, I wonder though, because I want to hit back a little bit, and if I just compare two of the philosophers from ancient Greece, Aristotle and Socrates. Socrates, I didn't see, I mean, it's not like I read a ton of what he wrote, but actually he didn't write anything, right? Plato wrote all his stuff.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem to be caring about the certainty issue at all.
He was actually actively opposing the idea of certainty.
Okay.
In some sense.
Okay, so opposing it means it was there before. If he was opposing something, it was there before him.
I cannot bring up again something that would say that he's actively saying uncertainty is bad, but the way that he acted in the various dialogues, in the way that he poses questions and debates people, it's usually one that is giving you the impression that we don't have certainty, and we're not going to be getting to a place where we're going to get final answers. The idea of a final answer is one that's going to generate
and
this.
Put it in your pocket.
Yeah,
an answer
exactly.
you can put in your pocket. I use that phrase because you'll see later Karl Popper uses the phrase. I found it interesting. Well, here's the thing too. Religions had already been in existence. Religions that claim a God, which is like saying absolute certainty, already existed before this point. Right? Like Judaism was already around for a while.
It was probably formalized. It was formalized piecemeal. Some of the pieces were even added after Jesus, for example. But let's say that Judaism has already existed at the time of the Greeks. So if we say that Aristotle, for example, was active in the 4th century BC, and supposedly Moses lived 1200 BC. Yeah.
So, but then Aristotle came, let's see, like 2 generations after Socrates. You know, it was Socrates, Plato's was his student, and then Aristotle was Plato's student. And Aristotle seemed to have taken a really big turn from Socrates, which was he would ask the question, you know, how can we be certain that an idea is true, or it is, or how can we acknowledge it as knowledge?
Yeah.
And the way he answered it was something like, you have to have a foundation for that idea, and you have to be absolutely sure that that foundation is correct in order for you to say that the idea it's founded on is correct. But with that logic, it introduces an infinite loop kind of thing, because now that foundation needs a foundation, and then that foundation needs a foundation. And by the way, religions, they seem to recognize this because they have an out. They say there's a first creator. How do they say it?
Yeah, a first mover, if you want also to use it from the language of Aristotle.
Oh, okay. First mover, yes. So that's like saying the founding knowledge that we use to build everything, all of our other knowledge on, is God. It's claiming God already built into the epistemology, it seems like.
Some kind of an ultimate basis that you're going to hit no matter where you're going to start from.
Yeah. And I guess other philosophies have said a similar thing, except they say the senses is the foundation that you can be absolutely sure is true and build other stuff on. And then we find out from physics and biology and stuff that actually no, our senses is very lossy information.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe we should hit that a little bit, because maybe a lot of people don't know that. You know, the concept of empiricism, which is old in philosophy too, a little bit newer than this stuff, but old compared to today. Empiricism is the idea or the philosophy that says our knowledge is gained by experience or gained by observation or through our senses. And it's implying, and it says it, by the way, it's open about it, that our senses, you know, are like infallible knowledge.
Yeah.
Sure about it. But where that goes wrong is, you know, basic stuff. I think a lot of people have seen these things. What are they called? Visual tricks. That's not the name.
The optical illusions.
Optical illusion. I said visual tricks. Optical illusions. Yes, there's so many of them. And you can, from that, the demonstration is, our senses suck.
There are so many things that you can actually demonstrate about the vision in particular, and this has nothing to do with illusions. It has to do with what we actually, what our brain, and not only the senses, because eventually our world is built based on that combination of the visual and auditorial and whatever input that you
Right.
have, and
Right.
then the brain itself is going to act
Yeah.
in the process of
So
constructing
let's
that image.
let's break it down for people. First, you get some sense data, and that is the hardware only. Okay. And then you might have a software layer, and I mean learned software layer. You have to learn your senses. Like when you were a baby, you were learning what these sound impulses are, and the sense, the seeing impulses. Right. Your first sight, when you see stuff, you don't even know what you're looking at. When you make, actually, I've seen studies about this where they talk about, they're saying that the babies can actually recognize a face, okay, or that it is a face.
Mm-hmm.
Let's suppose that's true. So let's say there's some hardware saying some of that, but there's multiple layers of interpretation after that. Like you just said, one of the layers of interpretation is grabbing data from the multiple senses and then saying, okay, what does this mean together? So if you hear a loud noise and you saw something real quick, those two pieces of information together, you might come up with that, and it still could be wrong. We're wrong oftentimes. I remember a really early one. If you're looking through a screen door, but you're looking at infinity, you're looking far. You're seeing through the screen door. You don't even see the screen door really. Mm-hmm. And then by chance, you might accidentally see something in the screen door, and you get confused of whether it's here or far. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's like its own optical illusion.
Well, at a fundamental level also, and this is not a kind of an illusion that comes from optics. This is how the brain tricks you into thinking that you actually see something that's not really there. So what happens is that the brain fills in the blanks in so many places that, for example, if you're looking at, and this can be demonstrated in experiments, and there are a few experiments like this that are shown at more or less the end of, or the second part of Daniel Dennett's book, Consciousness, which is a really, really nice book about exploring all these things. So if you have, if you think that in your peripheral vision, you're actually seeing the same detail as this little cone of vision that's right in front of you, you're actually really mistaken. The details that you have in the peripheral vision are constructed, and it can be demonstrated that if you put certain things, you're not able to distinguish the details. And so what happens is that the brain fills in that and gives you, instead of an actual real world, a constructed world that's more or less like an extrapolation of what you would expect to be there, but it's not necessarily what's really there.
And that's the point. You said the word expect. Mm-hmm. A ton of what we're, in a sense, deducing about what's there is not just from your senses, but also what you expect, which is a whole bunch of ideas that you developed in the past mm-hmm. through experience, but also more interpretation and logic and ideas and physics and chemistry and biology, if you know those things, right? If you don't know those things, you're coming up with all sorts of other expectations. Like you might think you're possessed by jinn.
Yeah. So I have a kind of an example that I often bring up in conversations that have to do with certainty, which is this idea that suppose that you are next to the edge of a cliff and you see that it's a really big chasm below you. Do you actually have certainty that if you fall, you're going to die or get injured, or that certainty about how gravity works is something that you can say, well, I'm not sure until I actually experiment with that, until I test it. But the thing is that you have actually tested that throughout your life, and evolution that led to you as an individual at that instant thinking and contemplating that question has already embedded within you this kind of sense that you're going to hurt yourself or die no matter what. You are certain that gravity is going to be acting the way that it's going to act. So what do you think about this kind of situation? Are we talking about certainty that is justifiable? Or is it something that we can say, well, I don't know, maybe unless I actually test it every time, I cannot say for sure that gravity is going to act in that way.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm going to drive your point a little bit more and then solve it, okay? So another way people say this is they say something like, oh, I wish I get the right words. If it's happened in the past, and each time that it happens, you can treat it as increasing the probability that it's going to happen again.
Right.
And this is absolutely ridiculous. First of all, it's completely void of any explanation of why anything is happening.
Yeah.
The way we work in science, in physics, chemistry, biology, and all those sciences, is you have to start with an explanation about a causal effect, and then we run experiments to try to rule out our explanations. And the reason we run multiple experiments of the same kind across different, we want other scientists to also run our experiment. The reason we're doing that is because we're doubting that our experiment went well. You know what I mean? Like, so if you run the experiment 20 times, hopefully you get the same result every time. And if you run it in 3 different places by different people who have actually literally different apparatus than you have, and you get the same results, that's what helps us. We're just trying to rule out doing the experiment wrong. But if all those experiments said the same thing, then that's just telling us the one thing we need to know about the explanation, that the experiment couldn't rule it out. So it's true as far as we know until we find out later. Then we'll find out it's not true and we'll find a better one. And I want to be clear. I'm not even saying it very well. The words I'm saying are not very clear. I really want to give Karl Popper's version of this, which I still think isn't like, it could still be better. You know what I mean?
Well, maybe I can preface that with something else that's connected with the argument that Popper is likely going to present. I didn't see the video yet, but one of the problems that we have is that people have a misconception that many of the statements that we have progress through induction, that you've done an experiment and another person has done the same experiment. You both agree, therefore you've actually verified or proven what the statement is, which in fact is problematic. And there is a famous example of this, the statement that all swans are white, for example. And then all of a sudden you have a black swan. So did you check all the swans at the beginning and ended up with this statement, which is probably what you thought you did? You had this counterexample that refuted the initial argument that you had at the beginning. And so building that argument on induction by looking at specific cases and generalizing from that, that's a very problematic way of proceeding.
So, and I'll just say one of the problems, again, which I said earlier, everything you just said, it doesn't have an explanation for why a swan would have white or black or another color. And so if you start talking about the explanation, you start talking about pigment, and then you can start theorizing why there might be black pigment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But just saying, I've checked all the swans that I was able to see in my area. They were all white. Therefore, all swans are white. That's ridiculous. That is not how science works. It's more like correlation is causation. If you say a correlation, now you can just assume a causation, even though there's infinite other logically possible causations that could have caused the same correlation.
And this idea of induction feeds into this illusion of certainty that people might have about whether it's statements about the persistence of gravity or some other statement that might be formulated in a more precise scientific way. That's not how it works. And in fact, if we were to pretend or to adopt this position, I don't think we would even go so far as to progress so much in science and in any kind of field of inquiry beyond some rudimentary basics that beyond which everything is going to fail.
So let's read a little bit more here. So this problem of, how can I be certain of my ideas was solved by Karl Popper. He's from a few decades ago. And he said, certainty is impossible. And by the way, my description here is not even very good. I wrote this a year ago, and I was trying to write something short. And when you write short, you also cut out a lot of things. So this is probably really bad. I'm glad we're doing this to extrapolate. Certainty is impossible. And actually, the way I'm going to clarify this is let Karl Popper do it in that video, okay? We should stop seeking certainty, and instead we should act with the fact that the certainty is impossible. Okay, so that one statement means, how do I say that? Well, there's no infallible source that we have access to. Even if there is a God, which means he's infallible, that doesn't mean we can talk to him or get that information.
I don't even know what infallible really means on a practical level. So even claiming that if you were to have access to a God, if one exists, I'm not sure what it actually means to say that.
I think what they would say is, okay, I prayed, he gave me a sign, and I'm sure that's true.
Oh, well, that adds several layers of complication because
how do you know it's not the devil? Right? Or something else that's totally not related to anything. In the past, they would take any sort of thing they didn't know about and call it a sign. Today, those same things, you couldn't call them a sign anymore because now you have a scientific explanation for it.
Right. So you could run an experiment, and that simple experiment for a primitive could be, I slaughtered a goat when I was asking for whatever, and the gods gave me that thing. So next time I'm going to slaughter a goat, and that's going to give me the same result. It's a kind of an experiment.
Causation logic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So since certainty is impossible, what are people doing? They're not really gaining certainty. All they're doing is building up faith in an idea, which isn't a thing. Faith isn't real, believing in something without reason to believe it. That's what faith is. They even say it that way, by the way, because when we talk about, how did you get convinced of whatever? And by the way, I think Christians in America are more open to saying this. Oh, it's not about convincing. It's not about that at all. You have to believe it, have faith in it, regardless of any lack of convincing.
And very often, actually, when you're debating also non-Christians and non-Americans, we're talking about Arab Muslims, say, at one point they might hit that same wall and just say it outright, that it's just something that I believe. It's something that I have a kind of a direct access to through my heart or something like that.
And that's what they'll say. The way a lot of Muslims will reply is something like, well, what you just said doesn't convince me. And what they reply, now that they've given up trying to convince you, now they say, well, something like, open your heart. I think they quote something in the Quran or Hadith. Yeah, open your heart and then it'll get in.
Yeah, there's plenty of verses that's of that type.
Which is like saying, let's analyze that for a moment. That's like saying, if it feels good, it's true.
Yeah. And that's actually one of the biggest problems that you have with religious people when they're trying to approach science, if they really are not willing to concede that authority that science has, because they would say, well, science is not capable of delving into this or that topic, so it's beyond the realm of science. So automatically what that means is that we have some other means that's capable of accessing this other realm, which is that internal truth or internal seeking mechanism that they have, and they give it authority because if for the individual who experiences it, it's so overwhelming that it gives them the impression that it must be true. While when you're looking at science, it's a much more rational and thoughtful endeavor that requires you to think about things, and it's not necessarily going to give you the same kind of emotional satisfaction that you would get from believing in these things.
And so let me throw one more thing in there. What a lot of people say when they say something like science can't talk about this issue, they sometimes say, well, I'm listening to my intuition. And I think those people are also thinking science and intuition have nothing to do with each other. But if you speak to any scientist, like even the big ones like a Feynman, he will say, no, that's part of the scientific approach. You have to use your intuition. But the point is, we don't trust our intuition as if it's a infallible source. But yeah, it's a valuable source, but it's also fallible. It has some stuff that's in it that's wrong, just like all of our ideas.
That's actually this brings this idea of non-overlapping magisteria that was introduced by Stephen Jay Gould, which I believe is a very, very damaging idea that shouldn't have been introduced in the first place, which talks about having this kind of domain that is given to science and some other domain that is given to non-science, to philosophy, to religion.
Yeah.
And they are supposed to be completely separate.
Yeah. So let's just say real quick, in my understanding, all of it is one bucket. All human knowledge is one bucket.
Yes. Because reality is one bucket.
Yes. It's all one. Here's how Feynman said it. Like when you say physics, chemistry, biology, whatever, those names, Feynman said nature doesn't know those names.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's all one bucket. Now, what a lot of people will say is, no, you can't use science everywhere. Well, I think they're confused about what science is. So let me correct them right now. You can say science, the approach of science is like taking all the best intellectual ideas from every field and putting it into one unit. That's the scientific approach.
Yeah.
Or you could say that's epistemology, or that's the rational method, and it doesn't matter what name you use. By the way, if there's somebody who's in the field of epistemology and says, yeah, this is how knowledge works, and then let's say somebody else makes a claim from one of the small fields like biology, and that claim is about epistemology. If the epistemologist says, well, I'm not going to listen to that because that came from biology, that is ridiculous. You can't have lines between fields like that. The only reason we use these names is just to help us categorize things.
Well, notice how this has progressed from a historical point of view. First, you had a kind of a general amalgam of all these fields together. Like when Newton was talking about physics, he didn't call it physics, he called it natural philosophy. And then you had the specialization that started happening in the subsequent centuries, where the fields.
And it makes sense that when you make a specialization, you get a new name.
Yeah, but the thing is, right now, people are realizing from, I would say, since 50 years ago, people are who are working in those fields, even though specialization has increased considerably, they're also realizing the importance of interdisciplinary work, that you're not really, that those walls of separation between different fields of science are just arbitrary walls that had to do with one formalism developing in one way, another developing in another way, but in reality, they're just talking about one reality.
And then that is also happening within the same field. So, for example, in psychology, you have people that follow Freud and then people that follow Jung, and the people that follow each group kind of refuse to look at the other group. They're both talking about psychology. And to be clear, there's a lot of things that is talked about outside of the field of psychology that is psychology. You know what I mean? It's so just because it's not a psychologist talking about psychology doesn't mean you shouldn't listen to it.
Yeah.
We talk about psychology a lot. I don't have a degree in psychology. I didn't even take a I took a psychology class in college, but that's nothing, you know. I mean, I talk about philosophy. I never took a philosophy class. So instead of seeking certainty, what we're doing is seeking error correction. We're trying to make progress on our ideas. We have a set of ideas and we improve on them, and that generally means slight improvements, not like sweeping the slate clean and starting over.
Yeah.
I mean, even when like Einstein came up with his theory of gravity, and it's upsetting the previous theory of gravity by Newton, it's not wiping the slate clean. That's not what happened.
That's the also one big misconception that the public have about how science progresses, because they think, well, if science keeps changing its mind about something so radically, it means that there's no basis, that idea of certainty that they're seeking as a kind of a thing that's analogous to religious thinking, for example, or even everyday thinking. But that's actually not what's happening. What's happening is that science progresses in a cumulative way where it's actually building on the previous stuff. It's not completely discarding it. It's modifying and tweaking and removing certain components that didn't work and generalizing from the outside. For people who don't actually know how this has happened, it might look like you have completely changed the paradigm. And people do talk about paradigm shifts in science, but those paradigm shifts are not just wiping the slate, like you said. It's just rethinking some of the things, because whatever it is that worked in the previous theory and it's still working, it has to still work in the new theory.
Yeah, so just to tell people a little bit, if you take Einstein's theory of gravity and set two things in it to, if you make the speed much less slower than the speed of light, and if you make the mass, more?
Well, the mass has to be small enough that you don't actually start seeing the effects of curvature significantly.
Okay, so very little mass in the sense that it's not making a lot of gravity, and very little speed in the sense that it's not close to the speed of light. And then once you input those two components into Einstein's equation and do some arithmetic or algebra, you end up with exactly Newton's account of gravity. So so Newton's theory became a special case of Einstein's theory. It's not wiping the slate clean.
Yeah, and the nice thing about this particular way to demonstrate the idea is that once you get the Newton term, you also get additional terms that can be considered as corrections, which are going to become more significant as those other factors are included. And in that case, that approximation needs to be reverted back to the full Einstein equation.
Yeah, when you say term there, I thought you meant word, but no, you meant a math term.
So when we're talking about a mathematical term, it means that there's a dominant term that is an algebraic expression that applies at this particular instant, and then the next order is going to be another mathematical expression, another term that's not going to be as dominant.
And you said next order. They don't know what that means either.
Okay. So
all right. Maybe one day we could get. By the way, Leah Zitter, remember her?
Yeah.
She said you and I should do a podcast like on physics, and and then I asked her why. She said because oftentimes when we're talking, and I want to give an example about something, I give an example from physics, and it helps her a lot. And she didn't know about it, and it's interesting. And I get that's why people would like it. So, by the way, and I'm not saying we do a second one, but if this one is finished, I have another one to do with you. By the way, I think part of the reason why people are not here is I gave people the wrong time because of the time zone change bullshit. I fucking hate this stuff. Why didn't they just make the time the same across the whole earth? Why do we need time zones? Can you explain?
I guess probably this kind of shift that happens as the seasons shift probably should be outdated in some way. It doesn't seem to be particularly useful, but I don't know. People seem to be liking it for whatever reason.
I mean, we still call, we still use the term electron spin, even though we know now electrons do not spin.
Yeah,
And that's not so. And we say sun up and sun down, even though sun isn't going up and the sun isn't going down. So another way to say this is we're never seeking perfection. What we're seeking is good enough for our current purposes. Or another way to say that is the best theory we have now that accounts for all the data we have now.
Yeah.
And, you know, and the reason Einstein came up with another theory that beat Newton's was, well, he did have some more data. And by data, I mean a thought experiment in his head. He never did any actual experiments. And the experiments he designed about his theory weren't done till decades later after he made his theory.
Yeah,
but the data, I mean,
but it's not purely thought experiment. So you won't be able to progress from the time of Newton into the time of Einstein just by looking at thought. There was a lot of experimental advance and other things that happened.
And so the point is, Newton didn't have all the data that Einstein did.
Yeah. And so when you're saying
did,
data,
he would have came up with Einstein's theory.
Yeah. So when you're saying data, it mixes both things at the same time. We are talking about actual empirical knowledge that wasn't available to Newton, and at the same time also additional.
Some of it was available to Newton. So here's an example, and I just remember this from when I read Einstein's book on relativity. He said, you know, if you're on a train and you shine some light, a flashlight, forward in the direction that you're going, if you use Newton's conception of things, what you would say is then the light is going at the speed that it came out from the flashlight plus the speed of the train.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't.
Yeah.
And I think Newton, at the time, they had such data, right?
Not quite. No.
They did.
The definitive demonstration for this happened probably.
They used mirrors, right? That they shot light across to mountains with mirrors, shooting it back to measure how much time. And then they tried it when the sun is coming here to the earth is spinning, so they tried it on this side and they tried it on this side, and they're expecting either to see different speeds, you know, with a little bit less because of the rotation of the earth, or a little bit more because of the other side, and they found it's the same speed.
Yeah, you're talking here about the Michelson-Morley experiment, which happened towards the end of the 19th century. And you can actually see that there was a lot of development in the intervening time, including this proposal of kind of a medium to carry electromagnetic waves called the ether, which people unfortunately still use when they're referring to the ether waves as something referring to the electromagnetic waves. And so it was demonstrated that this doesn't exist. But yeah, there was a series of other experiments that measured the speed of light and showed that the speed of light is not something that's going to change.
Okay, and so to drive this point a little bit more, Einstein's theory is not the end either, but it was the best thing that was available with the current data. Today we have better data. So as an example, you should probably finish this part, but what is it? Quantum mechanics doesn't mess with Einstein's theory of gravity. And we didn't know that data until Einstein was dead, right?
More or less. I mean, Einstein was also still trying to do some unification to make sure that things are consistent, but he was really suspicious of quantum mechanics until the very end. There were very famous debates that he had with Niels Bohr, for example, about these things. Even though he was actually one of the people who initiated some of the basic ideas in quantum mechanics, but he still was very suspicious of it. But understanding this conflict between quantum mechanics and general relativity did not materialize until much later. And right now, it is one of the biggest things in physics, one of the biggest unsolved problems in physics. And we're not really sure how this is going to be.
Well, the point is, the solution, when it comes, will be in the form of another theory that will explain both quantum mechanics and theory of gravity.
Yeah.
And resolve the conflict.
Yes. Yeah.
So instead of being afraid of doubt, and that's the thing, when you're seeking perfection or seeking certainty, what's happening there is actually you're fearing being wrong. You're fearing doubt. And that's the wrong approach. We need to embrace doubt. And it's beautiful.
So let's think about why this would be something scary to a religious person, because let's think about the implications of doubting. If I'm thinking about this from the point of view of a Muslim, if you're doubting, then you're doubting something that has very high stakes. You could go to hell, and so.
They made that up, though.
Well, from their perspective, that's going to be a really big issue, and so the certainty, quenching doubt whenever it's going to appear, is going to be really important for, at least from the perspective of the Muslim. In other religions, you might say, well, doubt is a kind of a test and so on, but from the perspective of a Muslim, doubt is a really scary thing. And so when I read this kind of sentence, instead of being afraid of doubt, we embrace it for its beauty. Having them appreciate what this idea is means that they have reached a kind of a settled internal situation where they don't have that pressing need for escaping something into some kind of certainty. So I'm sort of playing devil's advocate here and presenting their perspective and trying to show why it is that they actually do seek certainty. It does make sense to some level from their perspective that you want certainty, because if you're not certain about these things, you're basically risking your life. And so something like that, embracing doubt for its beauty, might seem to be something like a luxury that they cannot afford.
Okay, this next concept goes into that. Instead of being afraid of the unknown, we relish in our optimism that will uncover secrets that transform our world for the better. And optimism is the point here. When we doubt, we're optimistic we're going to get over the hurdle and learn something. And what you just said is, on the other side, they're pessimistic that they're going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
So they'd rather not even doubt.
And notice here how when you have that certainty that's engendered by religion or any other idea, if you have certainty, why would you seek knowledge? You already have all the knowledge that you want. That's it.
No,
You're done.
But what's weird to me is, even if they have the conception that, they have the answer about God, what does that say about the rest of their life? They're in this very modern world now. How do they use that conception with anything else they're doing?
Well, the answer to this question comes in the form of someone who might go dress up like someone from the 7th century, telling you that, no, you're wrong. I'm dealing with that world by giving an answer that comes from that infinite, infallible source, and that's my answer to your question, that I'm going to be living in that particular way because that's the only correct way of living.
So, but this brings up an issue. So by the way, Bruce is with us now. Hey, Bruce.
Hi.
Bruce Wayne.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I noticed an echo.
Yeah.
Can you turn off the sound from your speakers?
I will try. Can you? Maybe it's better now.
I don't know. We'll keep. Well, I heard myself again. Did I? I don't know.
No, I think it's. No, it's not.
Yeah, we're hearing an echo. So the sound from your computer is going into the microphone, but if you turn off your speakers, then am I saying that right? Turn off the speakers? But then he wouldn't hear us. What he did now is turned off, he muted himself. But
Yeah. Let me try to figure it out.
Okay, I think there might be a kind of a temporary fix for this. When you want to talk, maybe you can unmute yourself. That way it would be better, and then we can be a little bit quiet, and you can.
If we don't solve the problem, that would work. Yeah. But that's how what is it? Radios work with each other, right?
I mean,
you're either speaking or listening. Yeah. What was that last point we were just saying? I don't remember anymore.
So we were talking about certainty in religion.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we should talk to Bruce. This is weird. So Bruce,
yes,
you're here to talk about certainty, or to learn about it, because you read this post, actually, this one you're looking at here, and you said you're working on it, and I suggested you come on and work on it with us.
Okay. Now for the sound issue, unfortunately, I don't have earphones right now. If the suggestion from Osama does work, then I can do it. But if you still hear an echo, please let me know. Maybe we can. I can ask someone here if they have a solution or something.
Yeah, well, there's probably not much time for it, but it's not a huge deal, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's this temporary fix for now. It's not a big deal.
So Bruce Wayne, what is that? That's Batman, right?
Yes, the idea was that I can't use my real name, so I have to hide my real identity. So
no, I know, but also the idea is you like Batman. And by the way, I like Batman.
I have no idea what you're talking about right now.
Oh, really? Batman. Okay. Well, here, I'll just say it real quick. Batman is what is it? He was in a city. Lots of things are going bad. The police is not taking care of it, so he took care of it.
Yeah. That's the story. It's just a story. It's not real.
Oh, it is real. People do it today. I mean, there's no literal Batmans, but actually, just recently, I saw a movie where it's the whole movie is a setting of a murder case, and the jury was manipulated by someone who got in and was able to. He was saying he can turn the jury the way he wants. That's like Batman. Do you get what I mean? And you find out at the end of the movie they were doing it for a good reason, but they were manipulating the outcome of the jury case.
Yeah.
That's interesting. What's the name of the movie?
The movie is called Runaway Jury. I think it's called Runaway Jury on Netflix or anywhere. I guess.
All right.
It's old. I loved it though. It was fun. Yeah. I think now it's probably good to put on a video interview, 3 interviews, I think, slapped together by Karl Popper. He is what I would say the guy that dealt with this issue better than anyone else in his time, at least. But he corrected like 2,000 years worth of philosophy, from what I understand. So let me put that on, and then we'll talk about it. It's only like 8 minutes, okay?
All right. But by the way, I want to mention you gave me the right time, but I googled it one day before your daylight savings time.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I googled it now. It says 10 p.m. my time, but on the 8th of March it said 11 p.m. So
that sucks. I hate that kind of stuff. Okay, let me put this on and then we'll discuss it, okay?
I was struck by the tremendous difference between the attitude of physicists towards physics and the attitude of some psychologists towards psychology. What interested me so much was the following. Einstein, who at that time became very famous because he had predicted a certain effect in eclipses, he had predicted that if you observe the sun during an eclipse, then the stars near the sun become visible, that one knew, and these visible stars would appear to be further removed from each other than they would be at other occasions. Now, Einstein became very famous at this time, and what struck me was that he made certain predictions and then repeatedly said, if this prediction should turn out wrongly, then my theory is false. Now, try to think of something similar about Freud, who also at that time became very famous. Try to think what possibly could a man do what couldn't be explained by psychoanalysis. Whether he jumps into a sea, into a lake, or whether he throws a child into the lake and jumps after it and takes the child out. There could be no conceivable action of a person which could not be explained in psychoanalytic terms. But there can be very many things which cannot be explained in Newtonian terms or in Einsteinian terms. And I said that what is characteristic of genuine science is that it can be refuted by experience. That is to say that something like this is conceivable, which would refute it. While a science is not genuine, if whatever happens, it is always right. If a so-called science is such that it can explain anything you want, then I said it was a pseudoscience. If this glass would begin to hop and we investigate it and find there's nothing unusual with this glass, then we would have to give up many physical theories, especially Newtonian mechanics, and with it even Einsteinian theory. Einsteinian theory can explain a lot, but this hopping of the glass, it could not explain. As opposed to this, let us say our chairman would begin to hop, then this could be very easily explained in psychoanalytic terms. Here you see the difference between two ways of things which both called themselves science. And I do believe that very many of the statements which we hold for truth are true. I also believe that very many statements which we hold for truth are false. And I do not believe that there is a criterion to distinguish with certainty between true statements and false statements. And this is the deepest reason for the fallibility of man. This does not mean that we shouldn't try to find truth. And it does not mean that we shouldn't get nearer and nearer to the truth. It doesn't even mean that we cannot know that we have got nearer to the truth. We can know we have got nearer to the truth. But it means that we can never know that we have reached the truth.
Scientific theories can never be proven. A scientific theory is rich with many consequences. Much can be deduced from it. Proof that one of these consequences is correct cannot prove that all the other consequences are correct. In this way, the theory can become more interesting. It can succeed. It can stand the test. But it cannot be proven. On the other hand, the theory can be refuted. One has to schematize a bit, but one can say, generally, the testing comes after the theory in science. First comes the theory, the speculative explanation. or if you like, the hypothesis or the conjecture or the guess. That comes first. Then one tries to carry out experiments to test the theory. And here the important thing is that experiments are only apparently created in order to prove the theory. In reality, experiments have to be created in order to refute the theory when possible. The scientist is sometimes a bit astounded when he hears that. He's often not even aware of it. One consciously wants to support a theory. But only those experiments can support a theory whose result could refute the theory. Science is thus essentially theoretical. All science is essentially theoretical. The people who have believed in absolute truth have also believed they have the absolute truth in their pocket. They put forward all sorts of theories which they claimed as absolutely true. That's then why the notion of absolute truth has precisely been rejected by more modest thinking. That was a mistake. The right attitude is to say there is absolute truth, but unfortunately, we know that even if we express truth, we often don't know if it is really true. A scientific theory is perhaps true in the sense of absolute truth, but we cannot prove it. We don't know whether it is true. All we can say is that it has succeeded, stood the test. We don't, so to speak, have the truth in our pocket. And even if we have it in our pocket, we don't know it as true. We cannot identify it as being true. And for that reason, the notion of absolute truth is to be used with caution, that is, as an ideal, or what Kant called a regulative idea. A regulative idea guides us. It regulates our thinking. But it isn't an idea that we can achieve and reach and know here we have the truth. There are, of course, simple propositions that we know to be true. For the more interesting propositions, we come closer to the question of truth through discussion, critical discussion. And the really difficult scientific propositions always remain conjectures. These can be very good conjectures and very well corroborated and well tested conjectures, but they still always remain conjectures. We constantly find out that our theories are false, where we didn't, so to speak, foresee it. This discussion of truth is very important. For it is only when we set up a notion of absolute truth that we can really see how modest we have to be. Because we just don't have any criterion of truth. Because we don't have the truth in our pocket. What I call fallibilism, that is, the theory of fallibility, is the fallibility not only of every person, but of science, which is a very important position. What is called fallibilism requires, so to speak, as an addition, that we set up a notion of absolute truth, by which we measure our errors of judgment and our weaknesses. So Bruce,
subhanallah, I found that Karl Popper has a voice similar to yours, Fadi.
Yeah, well, he spoke in German, and in that part of the video, he was in German, and that's not going to make sense to people, so I thought to speak over it.
Well, still, subhanallah, brother.
So, Bruce, do you have any questions about that?
Yes, but before that, I would like to identify the topics he talked about.
Sure.
And I think he talked about 4 things, maybe five. But the first one was the criteria for validating a claim. which to him was experiment or validation through the senses. The second
No, I
thing,
think he didn't say that, but go on.
okay. So the second thing was the difference between science and pseudoscience. And the third thing was, can you prove a theory in science or not? And the fourth thing was, is there an absolute truth? Are there any absolute truths?
Okay.
So I don't know. Did I at least catch these?
Well, I mean,
four?
some of what you just said is it wasn't enough to, for me to say that is what Popper said. But that first one to me looked the opposite of what Popper said. That we cannot verify. There's no way to verify. We do experiments and we do criticism to rule out theories. Verification makes it sound like you're well, it sounds the same as proof. And what Popper was saying, there's no such thing as proof. We cannot prove.
Okay. So I might have questions, but I would rather maybe give you just a glimpse of the alternative point of view, my point of view, and maybe we can contrast both. So the alternative point of view is that, and of course I'm still studying this, so my view might change on this with time.
Same for all of us and Popper. Well, Popper's dead now, but
yeah,
he can't do it anymore.
Exactly. So the idea is the following: that cognition consists of three parts. The first part is perception, which means just looking, hearing, touching, etc. The second part is logic, so deduction and induction. And the third part is integration. And the idea is that certainty cannot be done by mere looking on the perceptual level, so by seeing. And certainty cannot be done with logic alone, but that certainty is achieved only through integration, which is the third step, which is what I think is missing in Popper.
So what do you mean by certainty can be achieved?
Yes, so I'll give you an example. So let's say all your life you have seen black cats. Now you might assume and say all cats are black. The problem with this is that it's a confusion on your part to say this, because what you really want to say is that all the cats I have seen have been black. To say that all cats must be black, you have to find an essential characteristic of what makes a cat and tie it to its color. And immediately you can see that this, no matter how many black cats you see, you can never be certain to say that all cats must be black, because you know that dogs, for example, can have many colors, that the color of an animal can change, and cats are a type of an animal. So you cannot say for certain that this particular animal will be different. Now, if you do find that it is different, it must be in relation to what makes a cat specifically. And to do that is the job of biology. And this is a negative example, an example of not finding certainty. To find certainty, you say all cats must have 4 legs. Why? Because now this is an improvised biological, physical argument, but it's of the form that you have to make. You say that motion itself for an animal with limbs dictates that you have 4 limbs. And this is not only true for cats, but also for dogs, that if you had 3 legs, it will not achieve the optimal motion, that 5 legs will be too many.
Well, sometimes an animal loses a leg.
Sure, but that's also explained by saying that it should have 4 legs. When it does not have 4 legs, let's say loses 1 leg, has 3, then the same principle, which was 4 legs is optimal for survival, now says that the 3-legged cat will be has less chance of survival. So you see, you did not lose the principle. The more abstract you go, that's the part that becomes certain.
And is that in degrees?
It is in degrees, but not in the sense of each claim alone. It's in relationship to the context of your knowledge. So when I'm talking about 4-legged cats, one might ask, why do cars have 4 wheels? It seems like it might have a relationship. So in the context of biology, you say that 4 limbs is the ideal type of motion for this type of being, which is an animal, for example. But if you go to machines and talk about 4 wheels, you might find that there is a relationship between the two, and that motion for a car is very similar to a motion for a cat. And you can find that 4 wheels is also connected to 4 legs. So, but within the context of biology, which is the theory, the context is the theory, everything you know about related to this subject. You can say that I can explain everything within this theory or in this context without contradictions using this principle. When you go to another context, maybe you can find a contradiction, and then you try to solve it, and eventually you will find that there is a deeper principle, deeper idea. Now this becomes certain. But the old idea was still true within the limited context.
Why do you say you were certain of the old idea if later you rejected it?
Yes, I rejected it in the greater context, but in the older context, the more limited context, it is still true.
So now you're not saying certainty, you're saying certainty within a small context.
Yes, certainty within a context, not small or big, but certainty has to be in relation to context. And the context is the biggest context ever, is everything you have experienced in your life, everything you know, everything you've heard, etc.
You don't seem to be saying the concept of certainty in the same way that Popper was saying it. You guys might be talking about 2 different concepts. Just because you're using the same word doesn't mean you're using the same concept, by the way.
Yes, I think that's very true.
So, and that's why I asked you, are you talking about in degrees? And because by the way, the people who believe in induction, there's a guy named Bayes, last name Bayes, Bayes, and he made a theory for statistics, and it applies well in that context, by the way. But people try to use it everywhere for epistemology to say that we can use probabilities to judge the likelihood that a theory is true. To me, that sounds like what you're saying when you're saying degrees of certainty.
It's not degrees in the sense of I am not sure, but in the sense of now my knowledge is much greater now that
so you're closer to the truth.
Sorry?
Like you're closer to the truth now.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
and Popper explained that too, that yes, we do get closer to the truth. And he's saying that isn't certainty. And by the way, when you think you have certainty, you stop looking.
Yes, and I think that the disagreement is, at least on the surface, is minor. So
it sounds like just a semantics disagreement, meaning it's not a real disagreement.
No, it is to some degree. I'll tell you why. Because the other part, which I wanted to mention about the disagreement, which is the lack of the concept of identity in Popper. Now, what does identity mean? And identity is this concept applies to all contexts. It is the root of the three laws of logic. So this is the thing that you can be most certain about. This is actually the part that is certain in all contexts. And what does it say? It says that something cannot contradict itself. So for example, a cloud cannot be a cloud and not a cloud at the same time. A cat cannot be a cat and a house at the same time. It has to be something. Whatever that something is, it has to be something in particular.
Can a cat be
that this
dead and not
identity-
dead at the same time?
Sorry?
Can a cat be dead and not dead at the same time?
Schrodinger's cat,
Absolutely
right?
not. I can tell you with certainty.
No, I think
With
that was
my-
just a joke, right?
Not really. Not exactly a joke, but yeah.
Yeah, it's very serious actually, and I think it's impossible. Why?
Is it?
I'll tell you.
Yeah, I think that's impossible for a cat to be dead and alive at the same time.
I'm not sure. About
Yeah, I'll tell you why. First of all,
that. Why?
all we have about the dead and alive cats at the same time, or electrons being at two places at the same time, etc., is just claims. Now, I know that they are very sound claims in the sense that physicists are honestly trying to find the answer, and they are doing the right math, and they are doing all the right experiments. But the thing is that nobody has yet experienced, nobody has yet observed an electron at two places at the same time. And physicists know this, that this is a problem.
Have you
And-
looked at the results of the double slit experiment?
Yes.
And have you tried to look at it when it's done with electrons?
Yes.
What do you conclude from doing it with electrons?
Almost nothing, except that on the screen, you always see the electron ending up at one place at one time. So
When you
whenever
check-
you observe, and this is everyone agrees on this, whenever you observe, you only observe no contradictions. Nobody has ever in the history of the entire planet observed one contradiction. Or maybe some schizophrenics might claim so, but it's unverifiable. You can't really, I haven't, at least. I don't know about you.
So you're bringing up the identity and non-contradiction thing. Popper didn't mention it in this video I showed, but that's very deep in his philosophy and in science in general. Contradictions don't exist in reality. When we see a contradiction, it means something's wrong in our knowledge.
Exactly, and this is not my idea, or I haven't even discovered it independently. It goes all the way back to.
No, I know what you're saying goes back to like Aristotle, and also some of what you're saying sounds like stuff Ayn Rand says.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly where I got it from.
Yeah. I don't think there's a contradiction between them at all, between what Rand says and what Popper says. But Rand does say in her work, she speaks highly of induction, but then she says, I never studied it.
Yes. Now, Rand wrote most of her philosophy in the form of two novels. So it wasn't written directly in a systematic form. She did write books.
Well, her non-novel is better for this, I think. I'm trying to remember. Oh, her book was just called Objectivism, wasn't it? The name of her philosophy?
Yes, the name of the philosophy is Objectivism. The main book on these issues was Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology.
That's it. Yes, that one. And that's where she says that she thinks science progresses by induction. But she also doesn't explain it, and she also says she never studied it.
Yes. So later, after Ayn Rand died, or actually before she died, there was this philosopher who she appointed as her heir, and his name is Leonard Peikoff, and he formalized a lot of these ideas, and he has lectures on induction, and he also co-authored a book, or maybe edited a book on the history of science through this idea of induction.
Yeah, and Popper, instead of saying induction is right or wrong and I don't know and I didn't study it, he's studied it and he explained why it's wrong. But not much of that was discussed here. We could probably do that one day. We don't have much time left, but this sounds like it's worthy of us talking again about this. To me, it looks like there's just a semantics disagreement, not a real idea disagreement. You're saying there's an idea disagreement. I haven't understood it. I haven't understood the contradiction you see. To me, it looks like everything is meshing, integrated fine between basically what Rand said and what Popper said.
I would have to agree with the most part of that there are very many similarities, but the issue is that I think the main part is what the difference is whether there is an identity for things and whether integration is an inductive process or not. I think these are the two issues here.
Yeah. And by the way, perception, logic, I wrote down the main points of what you said. Perception, logic, and integration, that's all what scientists do. All those three steps is what scientists do. One thing that you didn't explicitly say, but you meant it, I can tell from what you said. What we do in science is we make explanations about causal effects, and then we try to rule them out with criticism and experiments. And of course, doing the experimental step, you're doing perception, because you have to get sense data to try to rule out your theory. And of course, we're using logic, and of course, we're integrating things. I would say that's part of the logic.
Yes, exactly. But the idea is that what are these three things? How do you understand them in a way that is systematic, that you can practice every day in your life, outside of science even? And of course, Ayn Rand's accomplishments is using them in ethics and politics and art.
Yeah, and what I say, and I said that earlier in this episode, science can be used everywhere. And there's a lot of people that think it can't, and they think it only can be used in one area. And part of what they get confused about there is that they see science as only what physicists are doing. I think it's better to look at science as all the methods, all the best methods from all the fields, regardless of what field they came from, whether it's physics, biology, epistemology, philosophy of science, psychology, or anything else, or even theology.
Yes, I agree. I think Carl Sagan said something to that effect. He said science is a way of thinking rather than a body of knowledge.
Right. It's the process rather than the conclusions.
Yes.
Yeah. And here's part of the point is the conclusions. What Popper was saying was we're often wrong about the conclusions. We find out later, and we didn't foresee it beforehand. And
yes,
you mentioned context, but here's the thing: we can be wrong in understanding what the context is, or understanding that a specific context is part of a general one. That stuff is fallible. That stuff is using our logic.
Yes, but yes, there is a valid integration and invalid integration, or integration and misintegration. So human beings can make errors, honest or.
Then how can you be certain of one of your integrations?
Because integration itself is what shows you that you are wrong. It's only after you contrast what you know with everything else.
So by certainty, you just mean you tried to find out you're wrong, and then you found out that none of your criticisms or tests refuted your theory, and you're calling that certainty.
Yes, but not through perception alone, but also through integration. So not through experiments alone.
And that to me sounds like just a semantics disagreement, because Popper said what you just said, but he said it with different words.
If that's so, then that's so. I do accept that. I would just say that his idea, one thing that he can be criticized for, I don't think it's always valid to criticize him this way, but he said we can never call something certain, or we can never prove a theory, or something to that effect. Well, that itself is a hypothesis. So when you say never, it comes with 100% certainty. He didn't say 99% of the time we can't prove theories. So this is the problem where people can criticize Popper and saying you are saying things with certainty about certainty. So certainty is somewhat you cannot escape it. You cannot escape knowledge.
But that's like saying, if we talk, and he said this at the end of the video, if we mention the concept of absolute truth, then you're saying, then that means we have some absolute truth.
Well, I personally do believe in some absolute truths. One of them is the validity of reason. So if I doubt my reason, then what am I using to doubt my reason? Am I using something that is unreasonable? So how can something unreasonable prove?
I think what's happening here is you're saying a very vague concept. And by the way, it's very hard to criticize something vague, which is itself a way to rule out a idea because it's vague.
But which part is vague? People do doubt their doubt reasons. Every day you see,
because you use reason and you said one word, but it's a ginormous concept, you know.
Reason is non-contradictory identification. This is what I mean by it.
Reason is just those 4-5 words?
No, it's not the words. Nothing is words. But only words are words. But reason is when you look at a tree and you say it is a tree. You don't say it's...
well, I think you need to explain the reason a lot more than... For one thing, you got to mention perception, logic, and integration as part of reason.
Yes, these three are the three parts of reason.
And when we do reason, we make mistakes because we're not perfect in our reasoning.
And this is exactly where we disagree, because you are blaming, or maybe not. Are you blaming reason, or are you blaming some psychological?
Let me say it this way: our conception of reason has improved over time. So what we say today about reason is better than what we said 2,000 years ago about reason. And that's another way of saying, you know, we fixed mistakes in our conception of reason since 2,000 years ago. And we will fix some more. In another 1,000 years, they will be saying better things than what you and I are saying today.
Equating reason with
logic. I disagree.
Equating reason with logic seems to be a kind of an underlying idea that's going on here, and a kind of a direct access that is being claimed to that infallible logic is also being claimed, which I don't think is something that we can really advocate and not think about some kind of an access that humans have to that infallible knowledge.
Can I do an example for you guys?
Yes.
I did with my child. She was 8 at the time. I noticed she uses the word at the time. She was using the words like, I'm sure that this is true. And I wanted to help her with that, you know. So I one time, you know, I was like, okay, how are you sure? I think it was the math context, right? She's doing some math homework. And I was like, okay, so she just did a problem. And then she said, there's my answer. I said, are you sure? Or maybe she said, I'm sure. That's what it is. She said, I'm sure it's right or whatever. It's like, well, how did you find out? Like, what did you do? And so then one day she said she had to pee. And just for fun, I said, are you sure? She said, yes, I'm sure I have to pee. And then later, when it came to the math one, and I said, are you sure of the answer? She said, yes. I said, are you sure, like you're sure you have to pee? She said, no. And here's my point of the story. She was using the word, I'm sure, the phrase, in 2 different contexts, and they had different meanings. So just having the words, I'm sure or I'm certain, in 2 different contexts, they're meaningless. They're not meaning the same thing. And they can't, because the 2 contexts are so different. Like the way in which you know that you have to pee is a different thing, totally different than the way in which you know some math problem and the solution to it.
I disagree completely. I think it's exactly in the same way. And the error is in how we teach mathematics today, in saying that the axioms of mathematics are arbitrary and you just follow certain rules, and the teachers still tell you that it's right or wrong. And there is no perceptual evidence to validate 1 + 1 = 2. I mean, if
so you're saying you could be sure in both contexts?
Yes, because if you are hungry now, and you have to choose between eating one burger or two burgers. If you don't do the math correctly, you will be certain through the feeling of hunger that you are left still hungry after eating one half the meal.
What math are you talking about?
Sorry?
What math do you mean?
The math of counting the burgers in your meal.
Oh, just counting burgers, not calories or anything.
Yeah, but it will be the same for counting calories. So it's the feeling of hunger. If you fail at the math, you will feel it double the intensity or half the intensity. So it's exactly the same kind of certainty. I'm certain of 1 + 1 = 2 in the same way that I'm certain I'm hungry or not.
So notice in the video from Popper, he said he tried to contrast with simple propositions and very complex ones. And he focused on the very complex ones are the ones that you have to worry about with certainty issues, and it's just a conjecture. The very simple ones, he was letting that be. Go ahead and have your certainty, like a 1 + 1 = 2. But here's the point.
I do the opposite. I say the complex ones are the more certain, and the simple ones are the less certain.
So how does that work when the complex idea has a billion simple ideas in it, and the simple ideas you're saying are we're less certain of them, but when you mash them all together, they become more certain, I guess, because of the integration part?
Yes, exactly. Because integration is not just listing everything I know. It's saying what are all the connections between them. In a sense, it's like saying Newton's law. Newton's law is much more certain than a single observation. And this happens in science all the time. When someone observes something, they go and check.
So the way you're saying that, certain, I mean, we refuted Newton's theory since Newton.
No, I'm saying much more certain. So wrong use of the word. But
degrees of certainty again. By the way, Sam, the original conception of certainty, were they already building in degrees of certainty into it?
I would have a problem saying that certainty actually can be considered in that way. But in any case,
I think the original one is 100% certainty. And if you don't have 100, then you're not certain.
If you really want to talk about certainty as such, it seems to be an on-off thing. You're either certain or not certain.
Yeah, and that's all Popper is saying. If you treat certainty as on or off, it's either certain or not. We have the not part.
And
if you want to treat it as degree, go ahead.
The concept then turns into misusing the term certain in order to actually quantify probability instead of talking about certainty as such. Now, I need sorry about this, but I do have another meeting, and I just wanted to mention one thing about the that last thing that Bruce mentioned. I think, from my perspective, both are going to be hard to assign a certain certainty to, whether it's simple or complex. And in order to talk about the something like 1 + 1 = 2, go look at Bertrand Russell and Whitehead's book that actually goes into a huge mathematical description in order just to prove that simple statement in a mathematical way that's very rigorous. In the other case, when you're talking about complex ideas, what Kant might call synthetic ideas that mix internal with external, there are so many different things that so many links that would undermine what you can consider certainty. So the whole idea of certainty, for me, I would never slap that kind of stamp on anything.
I really think the way Bruce is talking about certainty, he's using it in the way that Popper used the phrase closer to the truth. Because, if you're 95% certain about something, that's just like saying you're closer to the truth than you were before on your last theory, which was...
I'm not sure about that, because when he mentioned things like the laws of logic and having these as immutable, that seems to be something a little bit more stronger than a probabilistic statement. Am I right, Bruce?
Yes. So first of all, in this area, I am a little bit confused about this issue. But I would also like to mention that it's not a matter of degree of probability, but it is in relation to some context. That this is the issue.
But we can be wrong about context.
Sorry?
We can be wrong about context even. We can be wrong in understanding the context. And let me say another point. I understand the idea of non-contradiction, but oftentimes we see a contradiction, we think there is one, and there wasn't.
Sure.
We're confused.
Sure, but what you can be sure about is that there will never be contradictions. It's logically impossible. Now, I just want to ask you one question in reply to all what you have said. Do you believe that certainty is impossible? And how certain are you about this claim?
So we have to define what we mean by it first.
Your definition.
Because you can make two questions there. If we're saying certainty is, I can have an idea and there's no possible way I could be wrong. There's no possible way that my fallibility could have introduced a mistake. No, I don't believe any of that.
You think it's impossible?
Yeah.
So how certain are you about this impossibility of certainty claim?
I don't have any certainty. That's what I just said.
I don't care about certainty. So it's possible.
What I do is I just look for flaws, and if I don't find any, and I did all the work to look for flaws, it's true so far until I find out I'm wrong later.
So here's the thing. Let me actually say something about this particular
but can I just,
situation. So
complete this thought? Because I asked the question and I did not comment on the answer, if I may. So if there is something that can change your mind about the impossibility of certainty, you said you look at flaws and you are open to change your mind. So even this position on the impossibility of certainty, you are open to change.
Yeah.
Then you cannot say that you are certainly certain that there is no certainty. You can't be certain that there is no
and
certainty.
I never did say that.
So here let me ask you this question.
So you're not saying that I'm wrong, that I am 100% wrong. So I could be right about certainty actually existing.
Yeah, and there could be a God too. And but that doesn't mean there is a God.
But that's a matter of you believing in it or not. In reality itself, there could be certainty. You just didn't discover it.
Exactly. That's the whole idea. If you think that you are saying that I'm not going to be certain about anything, and then you're saying that that very statement is a statement of certainty, and therefore you're contradicting yourself. What's actually being stated here is that if you were to reach a certain truth, one that is not going to be immutable after that, you wouldn't be even able to know that just by the fact that you've reached it. That's the whole idea. If you're climbing a mountain and you don't know where the end of the mountain is, and you're saying that I'm not certain if I'm going to be reaching the top, and this turns out to be an infinite mountain with some maybe features that represents something that like the top, but it's not a top from your perspective. You reach that and you pass by that and you don't even know that you have passed it. That's what I'm saying here. That the idea of certainty is not something that we know. It's not something that we have experienced unless you count for the emotional aspect of this. I am certain of this and therefore it's true.
All right.
In any case, I really have to leave. I apologize for this, but
Okay.
I have another meeting.
Bye.
Thank you, Osama.
Than't you for coming.
Thank you.
This was really good so far, and I gotta leave too. We gotta end this, but I'll just say, you don't. I thought this was gonna focus on, like the problems people have with wanting certainty, and then, and helping people with that. But that this is different, and this is fine. By the way, this is just as good. I think we should talk about this again if you're willing to do that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Next episode, let me just tell you what it is, and we'll tell everyone real quick. Like, subscribe, and share. Suggest topics or call in. There's links in the video. We have a Discord. And here's what we have next week coming, okay? Next week, we have... The topic is... oh, shit, let me find it. Why do people convert to Islam, or really any religion? The spiritual issues, the psychological issues, the moral issues, and the epistemic issues. And wanting certainty is one of the epistemic issues. So you could come on again next week and talk a little bit about this. Or do you have something to say about it now?
About wanting certainty?
About how people want certainty, so they try to do something that makes them feel like they have certainty.
That's a question of honesty. Yes, that can very
well.
Well
what they do is oftentimes they respond to this by going with faith.
Yes, that's very common.
Yeah, that's the main part I was trying to focus on. But no, I like the way you took it. You know, having a serious philosophy discussion about Popper and Rand and all that. This is the kind of stuff that I have fun with. By the way, I don't know too many people that are willing to have that kind of discussion with me on there. So,
maybe next time it can be more concrete, more scenarios from real life, political issues, current events. So.
And it will be, yeah, because we're focusing on why people are, going to religion. And it's not only about certainty, obviously. That's just one issue. But I wonder if certainty is always wanting certainty, or wanting to be sure that you have the right theory about God or morality or spirituality or why we're here on this earth or anything like that. I think by wanting that certainty, that's what leads them to a set of claims or a theory or a religion that says they have certainty. We can give you certainty. Just come to our church. That's what happens.
Yes. I think that there are the main issue here is the problem of knowledge and ethics. Because if I tell you that the universe is 14 billion years old or 12 billion years old, most people will not care at all if they got it right or wrong, or if they're certain or not. But in questions of how to act, what to do in life, what's right and wrong, you cannot act based on 1% chance that I might be doing what's right. I mean, you can actually make this experiment. It will be an evil experiment.
Well, babies are doing that at birth. Babies are acting in a way that it's a little bit random. They don't know what's going to work. They try stuff. They notice some stuff working. They try it some more and improve on it. And then they're 40 years old like us. I'm 46 at least. I don't know how old you are. And yeah, they've developed a lot since then. With a lot of logic, integration, and those kind of things.
Exactly, but the idea is that there are 2 points in your life. First of all, the age of reason, which might be 13, 14, 15, in which point people just feel responsible for their own choices. Before that, a child can just say, my parents told me so, and they will not even understand fully the concept of what if your parents were wrong. And the second part of your life is at age 18 or 16 or 20, depending on the country, where you are legally responsible. So people, you just realize at some point that your actions have consequences and they can be good or bad. And if you don't have a theory of how to act, then you can go to a church or mosque or whatever, and they will give you something that even if you are unsure about, you might say a bad theory is
right. And to be clear, that church or mosque is telling you we're certain of our ideas and we can help you be certain.
And that's completely not philosophical.
Yeah. It's not. Okay, well, this is very good. We got to end it here. Thanks for coming on, Bruce, and hopefully we'll see you again next week.
Thank you very much for having me, and I'm very glad to having been here. And
it was very fun. Nice to meet you.
Absolutely. And the confusion about the time, it's very unfortunate. I really regret it. Maybe next time we can.
I think it was my fault. I remember using CDC 6 months ago when it was a problem.
I actually checked my browser history. You gave me the right.
Well, but if I gave you CBT, it would have worked in both days.
I don't know about that, but it's a rare coincidence that you give
Yeah.
a time just one day before the daylight
Yeah, I
saving
know.
time
I
in
know.
two different
Twice a year.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, that's it, everyone. Thanks, Bruce. Thanks to everyone else for coming. And thanks to Sam, even though he's not here. All right.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.